Welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the winner of History Through Fiction's third annual short story contest, Cecil Beckett, and the author of The Blood of Englishmen. Cecil, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, let's start with who the story is about. It's called The Blood of Englishmen, which, if you don't have any context at all, it makes you kind of wonder, well, what is this about? So tell us who the story focuses on.
Well, the story is about the Red Baron, or Manfred von Richthofen, who was a war ace in the First World War for Germany. My story really concentrates on the end of his life, really the last year of his life when he had been injured and his personality changed. That's really what intrigued me about the story.
Are you familiar with the illustrator Charles Schulz and Snoopy and his Red Baron act?
A little bit, yes. I remember seeing that when I was younger, and interesting enough, I just saw it again recently.
Okay, because I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Charles Schulz is from St. Paul, Minnesota, which is the city right next door. And he created Snoopy, and he's always this flying like the Red Baron in his imagination, and I think that's what kind of popularized this history for a lot of people. So it's kind of interesting, you there in New Zealand, me here in Minneapolis, and we have that connection that way. So where did your interest start in the Red Baron?
Well, I think in the last year or so, there's been a lot going on in the world with wars and another war in Europe, and I think that's kind of made me think back about previous wars that's been in Europe as well. And the First World War has always struck me as a particularly, as all wars are, but this one was a particularly stupid war. But it was also intriguing the way that it was fought, and particularly the early air battles, which were really been unique in history and haven't been fought like that before or since.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because flight was in its very early stages. It must have been dangerous just to get in a plane and fly alone. What were the capabilities of the planes, and how long did it take these pilots to actually learn how to be in fight a battle in those planes?
Yes, well, I think that was one of the most interesting things about it. A lot of these pilots had very little training and ended up in the air fighting for their lives with not much knowledge of how to fly the plane or indeed what they were actually doing. And a lot of the pilots on both sides had very short lives, and it was a terrible time for a lot of them in the end.
And what were you able to learn about? I mean, I don't know if you have any experience in aviation in researching this story. Did you research what the planes were like? Were you able to visit a museum that had a plane from World War One or anything like that?
I have visited museums and seen the planes in the past, and I think probably even as a child, I kind of grew up reading Biggles books. And as I got older, I read Captain W. John's autobiography, which goes into a lot of detail about learning to fly and how he himself was a pilot in the First World War. And also, I've done probably further reading on the planes and how they were put together and how the pilots learned to fly them as well.
Well, let's talk about the actual storytelling aspect here. You had to embody the Red Baron. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his. Manfred was his name, is that right?
I think it's Manfred von Richthofen.
Manfred von Richthofen. It was a first-person narrative here. What was it like for you to embody him, and how comfortable did you feel doing that?
Yeah, well, I think from the kind of choice of point of view, I chose the first person point of view because I wanted to perhaps get across the change of how he was feeling about things. I mean, up until when my story really began, he had been a very successful war ace and had at that stage more than 60 confirmed kills. But really, from shortly after my story starts and he gets injured, his personality changes and things become a lot more difficult for him. And that's probably the point of the story I was trying to get across as much as anything.
And how did they diagnose it at the time? versus how it might be diagnosed today? Did they have much knowledge around what happened to him and why his personality changed?
Yeah, I don't know how much they knew about neuroscience in those days. Certainly these days, there'd be a lot more done in terms of medical imaging, and there'd be MRI scans and all kinds of things would be done to make a diagnosis. But I think in those days it was much more hands-on. If you had a bullet wound to the head, you saw a bullet wound to the head, and all you could probably see was what you saw with your own eyes. And surgery would have been much more kind of simple as well in those days.
So the story has a subtlety to it that you're not as the reader as a reader myself. I didn't feel like you were kind of forcing anything on us, and yet it has a very huge impact by the end, where you really get a wave of emotion. Can you talk about crafting the story so that you're not trying to force anything on the reader, but just bringing them through this experience, and how much in the kind of drafting and revising stage did you have to do in order to accomplish that?
I think when I try to write, and I'm by no means a experienced writer, but I do try and to keep the story as simple and probably as minimalist as I can. And I often, when I start to write the story, I write the story out as a fairly quick draft of what's going to happen. Then I go back and rework on it. But I think probably cutting stuff out is as important as what is left in, really, and letting bits be decided by the reader themselves rather than actually having to explain every little detail to them.
Well, let's talk about your background as a writer. I saw in your bio that you placed second 2 years in a row in the Victoria Odyssey House short story competition. What appeals to you about the short fiction style, and are you writing any longer form fiction?
So I've probably only been writing seriously for about 5 years. I'm actually medically trained and worked in that field all my life. So writing's been something I've come to later in life. It probably started during COVID, when I had a little bit more time away from work to do this, and I did a creative writing course to begin my interest in writing. And pretty much I work in short fiction, short stories, and flash fiction. I find that type of fiction interesting to write because you've got lots of variety about what you can write about, and lots of you can do different projects at the same time if you like. I haven't started a longer project. I don't know if I'll do that in the future, but at the moment I'm quite happy to just continue writing short pieces.
And when did you decide to go to the Writers' College, New Zealand Writers' College? What inspired you to take that step, and what was your experience like there?
Um, so I think I wrote a few pieces to start with, and I thought, well, this isn't such a bad thing to be doing, and I thought perhaps I should learn how to do it a bit more adequately. And that's when I enrolled to do the course, and that took about 12 months to do that, and just to learn a few tricks and techniques of the trade, I guess.
Was that recently, fairly recently after you started
I
writing?
did that about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay. And are you pursuing any other avenues for learning the craft, or is it all through experience and reading at this point?
No, I continue to do little bits of online creative writing courses and forums online as well with myself, and sometimes with other people as well, just to try and hone little bits of um, talent, I guess.
So we are on opposite sides of the world. So as long as I have you, tell me what it's like living in Auckland, and is it what do you enjoy about living there? Have you lived there all your life?
So I actually grew up in more rural New Zealand. I grew up on a farm in the countryside, about 2 hours away from Auckland, but I've lived here most of my adult life. I went to university in Auckland. I trained to be a doctor in Auckland, and I've worked in medicine in Auckland since that time. Auckland's a city of over a million people, so for New Zealand, that's our largest city. It's quite a big city geographically as well. It stretches quite a long way from top to bottom, so there's um, plenty of room, but also these days there's plenty of people and plenty of traffic as well.
Do you get outside of the city and do hiking or types of recreation?
Yeah, I mean, we're quite lucky in New Zealand. You don't have to go too far. You can find a beach or a mountain or a forest without having to travel too far. So there's very much lots of recreational activities at your doorstep, really.
Nice. Well, any final thoughts for readers on the Blood of Englishmen? What do you want them to take away from reading this history about the Red Baron?
Well, I think anyone who reads the story, it's their experience, and they can take away from it what they like. For me, the main thing I was trying to focus on was the conflict within the Red Baron himself, as he kind of battled himself following having a head injury, and in the end, it was probably an unsuccessful battle, as many battles are.
Well, Cecil, congratulations once again on winning our short story contest, on being the title story of our forthcoming anthology. Thank you so much for finding us and sending us your story, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.